So welcome to a better component architecture. In this video, we are actually going to get the intend move forward and backwards working from our stick. I'm using the controller left stick now rather than the shoulder buttons, and we're going to have it done a slightly different way with an initialize method on the tank movement component, and furthermore the tank movement component is going to be added here in Blueprint rather than being inherited, and we'll see how this works and how it keeps our code even cleaner. So I'll see you in there. Okay, so we want to actually move forward now. So that means that in the tank movement component here, we need to be able to access the tracks. So how are we going to access the tracks? Well, before we dive in and do it how we did with the aiming component, if you remember, the tank received references to the aiming component in Blueprint, and then we pass that set barrel and set turret reference through to the aiming component. Well, that's fine. It's a valid way of doing it. It's particularly a valid way of doing it when we compose our aiming component into our tank through C++. But the rest of our objects are composed in here in the inspector. We equally could have added this aiming component like this, custom tank aiming, and then we would have all its properties. We decided not to do it for the aiming component. In fact, we've decided not to do it for the movement component, but let's try things a slightly different way with the movement component. Let me explain briefly with the aid of a diagram. So we have a tank, and we're passing those references to the aiming component, as I just told you. We're also calling methods on the aiming component. But the aiming component, the only reason we need a barrel and turret on the tank is because the aiming component needs it. So it's kind of a bit backwards. We're passing it around in a loop, right? And the same thing with the movement. The movement now needs access to left and right track, but we don't need to pass those references to the tank. Why not just make it so that only the movement component has those references? It would be a lot simpler. And it particularly gets simpler when you have even a third and a fourth component. And it will simplify the interface of our tank, particularly the public interface here. We can get rid of these references. So let's leave the aiming as it is. It works, it's fine. We may fix it later. But for comparison, let's try doing the movement component this different way. So let's think about how we're going to do it. We're privately in the movement component going to need ourselves a couple of tracks, right? uTank track. Now uTank track will currently be unknown to this class, so we do a forward declaration, class uTank track, and while we're here, why don't we tell everybody what this component's about? Responsible for driving the tank tracks. Basically, that's what this component does. Okay, so we have a uTank track and its left track, and we're good people, so we initialize to the null pointer so that we have a known memory address that we're pointing to. Right track. So we have a left and a right track available here. Okay, so on the tank movement component, let's write ourselves an initialize method. Void uTank movement component, initialize, spelt the British way, of course. So we have a uTank barrel, a uTank track pointer called left track to set, and we have a uTank track pointer right track to set. Quite verbose, but they fit on the screen, so they're good with me. Okay, so these things are very much like we did in the tank aiming component, if you remember. Let's look at it C++. We had these setters here, so it's very similar to that, but we're going to do both of the things that we need, both of the tracks, in a single method in this case. So first thing, we better protect these, so if, which way around should we do it? If not left track to set, or not right track to set, then what are we going to do? We're going to get out of here. We may want to report an error if we have any problems. Okay, so now what are we going to do? Well, it's simply left track equals left track to set. It's this sort of stuff that we love programming for. Right track equals right track to set. Sorry about the sarcasm. Okay, great. So now let's go ahead and declare this method. Now, it's going to need to be public because we're going to need to be calling it from the blueprint, and it is part of the public interface of the movement component to initialize it. It's something that needs doing when the component is added. We may as well go ahead and make it a ufunction straight away. It's going to be in the setup category, and it's going to be a blueprint callable initialize method. That's correct. Okay, let's go see this in action over in the blueprint, and I'll put you back to the code while it compiles. So we have a blueprint callable initialize that's going to take in the two tracks to set and then just set the local variables so that in our intend move forward, we've got hold of the variables that we need. Now, was that a succeed or a fail? It was a fail, and it's something to do with my void. And on line 23, what have I done? Void should be preceded by a semicolon, and I've just missed a semicolon there, interestingly, on line 20. Okay, easy to miss. Okay, especially with these strange U functions in the way, which make things a little harder for us. But anyway, we are getting used to it as we improve our Unreal knowledge. It's worth it, isn't it? It's a pretty powerful engine. All this effort's got to be worth the pain, surely. Surely it's got to be. Okay, so I've failed the compile again. What have I done wrong this time? And this time it's because in the... I don't know. Let's read the error message. Uses an undefined class uTankTrack in the tank movement component header file. That's because we want it to be a pointer to a uTankTrack, not a uTankTrack class, right? So let's try that again. We don't want an instance of a uTankTrack class because we can't have that at this stage without having the uTankTrack available. We just want a pointer. I just missed the pointers. Good, so there's two different error types you've seen and know how to correct in future. Let's go for third time lucky compilation on this. I'll leave the code on the screen. Aha, that sounds much better to me. So let's go and take a look at the tank blueprint now. Now, when we are in the tank blueprint, we no longer need the tank movement component here inherited. So we can remove the code that puts that in. And while we're there, where is the tank movement component? It's not available yet. Tank aiming is, but tank movement isn't. Why can't we add tank movement at the moment? Well, if you look in your tank aiming component header file, you'll see that the class has this annotation that makes it blueprint spawnable. So let's do the same thing to the movement component. And while we're at it, let's go ahead and in the tank.cpp, let's get rid of the create default pub subobject movement component. Okay, so we don't need to do that anymore. So let's try compiling. And then while it's compiling, I'll flick through the code files for you so that you can see all the things we've changed. In fact, a better way of you seeing what we've changed is for me to go to the source control and to show you the unstaged changes in progress. So here you go. I've removed from the tank CPP the create default subobject because we're going to be adding it ourselves in Blueprint. We have added an initialize method in here inside the tank CPP, tank movement component CPP, that just lets you set both the left track and right track reference at the same time. And finally, we have put a forward declaration of uTankTrack in because we need that for these pointers at the bottom. We've annotated the class to make it blueprint spawnable component, which we'll use in just a second, and we have declared the initialize method. So they're all the changes so far. Cool. While I went through that, oh, hang on, we don't need to restart the Epic Games Launcher. We need to find Unreal. It's crashed. So my eyes got drawn up to the Epic Games Launcher because Unreal had crashed. So we don't need to restore anything. Let's go ahead and make sure the code is compiled, which it is. Let's go to the tank blueprint and take a little look at it. So in the tank blueprint now, we can see that the movement component isn't there anymore, and we can add a tank aiming component from the custom section. Tank movement component, rather, from the custom section. There it is. It's available now because we made it a blueprint spawnable component. Remember here. Okay, so there it is. Now, once we've got it, firstly, this tank movement component here in the input setup, that is one that we created in C++. We need to get rid of that and bring in our new tank movement reference. There it is. Great, so that will fix that. And then the second thing we need to do is on begin play, we want to look for this initialize method. There you go, initialize tank movement, great. It's already found the reference to the tank movement component instance, this guy here, which is fantastic. So then we just need the left and the right track to come in like so. Great. And I'm going to prevent the lines from crossing just because it's neater. Easier to see what's going on. Compile that up. I'm going to save all because if it crashes, I don't want to lose any work, and play. And it seems to work. We seem to have the game running. So what I want you to do now as a challenge is finish the movement. Finish, intend move forward. Make sure the tank actually moves, and also make sure the speed is variable. So go ahead, pause the video, and make that simple finishing to our architecture now. Okay, welcome back. So in intend move forward, this is where we get to very clearly say what we intend to do. So left track, and then we can reach through the left track pointer to, I think it was set throttle, was it? Or throttle, or I can't remember. Let's go and have a look. Tanktrack.cpp, set throttle was the method I'm looking for. So set throttle. Maybe it's the semicolon on the end of that log entry that's throwing things off, I don't know. I'm going to ignore it and just get on and set the throttle to the throw value. And we're going to do the same on the right track. I'm just going to check the tank movement component header file to make sure that I've spelt these right. I have. And let's also make sure, okay, the problem here is that we have not hash included tank track.h. So therefore, when it looks at the left track object, it doesn't know about any of the methods on it because it hasn't included the header file. But once that gets included, these two things should work. And to be honest, this is as simple as we need. Let's go ahead and compile. I'll leave the code on the screen while I'm compiling. The things that are highlighted in blue are the only things that have changed. I'm going to grasp my controller for all I'm worth. And then let's celebrate if this works. I'm going to hit F11. I'm going to pull there you go. The shoulder buttons, they're the two shoulder buttons taking me backwards. Now I'm going to try the left stick backwards, cool. And the left stick forwards, that works as well. So I can go forward and backwards using just the left stick. I can still rotate using the shoulder buttons. Later we'll bring that into the left stick as a second possibility. It's nearly there. All the problem is if I'm left stick forward and then I pull the two, oops, it glitched. It had a self-collision or it collided off some imperfection in the terrain there, which is something we can sort later. So what I'm saying is that if I'm going both shoulder buttons forward and then I push the stick forward as well, I end up going twice as fast. That's something we will need to sort. And because it's something we need to sort, we need to put a to-do in here. To-do, prevent double speed due to dual control use or something like that. Okay, so if we put in an input on the stick using the intend move forward and we go ahead and directly input the throttles, then these two things are adding together and we need to prevent that in the long term. Okay, so I'm just going to have a little tiny tidy up in the blueprint to prevent the cross wires slightly obsessively, and I'm not going to go mad though, and that's it. Anyway, well done on getting this far with the movement, and I'll see you in the next video.